All right, man, peace. So, Jonathan Martin, the former starting offensive lineman of the Miami Dolphins and later on the San Francisco 49ers, was taken into custody due to some threats that he made over social media towards his former high school. I believe the high school's name is Harvard Westlake, as well as some former Miami Dolphins teammates who were involved in the quote unquote bullying scandal back in 2013. What's very interesting about that whole issue is that it's very clear to me that this person, Jonathan Martin, is suffering from some identity disorders, one of them being racial. And in my view, just my opinion, it would not shock me if he's also suffering from some sexual identity disorders also. All right, allegedly. Wouldn't shock me. But you know what? Let's let them talk about it for a moment. I'm going to chime in.
Yeah, all right. Time to show you some of this morning's headlines. The Los Angeles Times reports former Miami Dolphins player Jonathan Martin was questioned by police Friday after a disturbing Instagram post appeared on his account. The post said, quote, "When you're a bully victim and a coward, your options are suicide or revenge."
Now, look at what he stated. He said, when you're a bully victim and a coward, your options are suicide or revenge. So, brothers, this is why you have that statement that a coward dies 1,000 deaths or a coward dies 1,000 times. Because he keeps reflecting back on those moments when they emasculated him and he did nothing. Very similar to the Terry Crews situation. Terry Crews is haunted by the fact that he didn't have the courage to stand up to that top level Hollywood exec. I believe his name was Adam Bennett. And I had some people in the comments that were saying, well, how could you say that he should have defended himself? He did the right thing, so on and so forth. No, he didn't do the right thing. He knows he didn't do the right thing because that's why he's tortured about it. Much like this man here, Jonathan Martin. He calls himself a coward because he knows that he should have nipped it in the bud. In life, unfortunately, we live in a very cold world. A very cold world. And so many of these people are demons. They're dealing with demonic possession. And they get their rocks off by trying to see who they can quote unquote intimidate, who they can get into a back and forth, right? They call it quote unquote trolling, right? That's why a lot of these trolls end up dead, unfortunately for them, because they don't have the positive energy that it takes to know how to resolve problems responsibly. So they go through their life trying to see who they can intimidate or who they can defile. Most likely because that's a learned behavior. That's what was done to them. But when I see this person, Jonathan Martin, first off, he's a so-called mixed race person. I believe that his father is a Caucasian and his mother is a so-called black woman. So he's been dealing with identity issues for most of his life. And he even acknowledged it in part of his Instagram post where he stated about his high school education that he went to an upper crust Caucasian school or white school, which did not prepare him for what he would have to endure in the NFL with a lot of the quote unquote hazing that he was put through. He didn't know how to deal with it. He didn't know how to resolve those type of problems because where he came from, he was not accustomed to those type of situations, those type of confrontational scenarios where he had to nip it in the bud right away. When you're from a certain neighborhood, a certain community, you know when somebody's trying to pull your card, when they're trying to test you, and you have to nip it in the bud right away. And whatever you have to do, whether it's a strong look or whether it's an action, unfortunately. It's unfortunate, but that is a part of life. Because once again, we live in a very cold world. And sometimes some people only understand a certain type of communication. And in that meathead world that he was in the NFL, they wanted him to bust him upside the head with a football helmet. That's what they wanted him to do. And they would have left him alone after that. But he didn't understand that language. And also, to be quite frank with you, it would not surprise me if he's struggling with some type of sexual identity disorder where he may be trying to repress some form of homosexuality, allegedly. Now, according to the reports, they took him to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. We know that he's a Stanford graduate, so he may be a Monarch athlete. Who knows? We know that he was there around the time that Harbaugh was there because he was teammates with Andrew Luck. So who knows what the situation is with this case. He may be having an MK breakdown, or he may just have been a person who was raised in a very mixed up environment, pun intended, because many of these people who are the products of interracial relations, they go through these issues. You look at a Halle Berry, a Mariah Carey, so on and so forth. They have trouble trying to verify within themselves who they exactly are. Now, those women, they're definitely monarch programmed. So they have a series of problems, Mariah Carey and Halle Berry. That's a whole other, that's a whole other topic for another day. But the interracial component can never be poo-pooed. It can never be pushed to the side, because it is something that makes a major difference. And by his own words, he was not accustomed to dealing with those type of situations. His father had never taught him that. Going to the posh high school that he went to never taught him how to deal with those type of issues, unfortunately for him. And this is when you get threats like this, where people claim that they're going to shoot up schools or find people and enact revenge, because when they could have nipped it in the bud by just having a fight or busting somebody over the head, they let it go. They let it slide. And now they dream about it every night. They have nightmares about it all the time. They're suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They're having mental breakdowns. Now they no longer know how to interact with people, all because of this unresolved issue from 4 or 5 years ago. So it's very important that people understand, and when I say people, particularly so-called black men, how to nip things in the bud. Many of you brothers been working in the corporate environment, and I say this all the time. In the corporate world, they view the so-called black man either as the angry black man or the nice black guy who they can walk over. Those are the two archetypes for the so-called black man in corporate America. So it's up to you what you want to be considered. But those are the main two archetypes that they're going to try to fit you into.
It showed a shotgun with the name of Martin's high school written across the barrel, along with the names of 2 former NFL teammates he accused of bullying him.
Now, it has the name of his high school written across the barrel, so was he bullied in high school as well? He states that he went to a mostly Caucasian, very affluent high school. Of course, he was a football star there. And that's another thing. He probably felt like he had to join the football team so that he could approximate some type of masculinity or create an identity for himself in high school and from high school onward. He may have been a cat who was just into reading and chess or whatever, but because he was a 6'3", 6'4", 280-pound black guy, maybe he felt like he didn't fit into those circles. Maybe he felt like he had to assume some type of an identity that was never for him, because quite frankly, the NFL culture is a meathead culture. It's not to say that there are not any intelligent cats in the NFL, but for the most part, it's a meathead culture. And if you're not a meathead, it's not for you. I mean, for the most part, that professional athlete world is a meathead world. It's also a pansexual world, by the way. So from that standpoint, who knows? He may have fit right in. But I think that there are a series of problems with Mr. Jonathan Martin, and he certainly is going to have to get a tune-up. He's going to have to get reprogrammed, get doped up, and who knows, maybe some electroshock treatment. That's normally what they do to MK assets that are having these type of breakdowns. That is if he is indeed an MK asset. But just looking at some of his issues, he doesn't even necessarily have to be an MK asset. He could just be just another product of a mixed up environment, of a Caucasian super liberal father who thought that he was going to inseminate a so-called black woman, and they were going to live the quote unquote American dream and send their mixed race son to an affluent high school, and the sky was going to be the limit. Things are not always that easy. They're also not always that simple. Life in general is simple as long as you follow, as long as you follow the codes, you follow what's right, you follow what's obvious, and you think about things down the line.
That prompted officials to cancel classes and close the Los Angeles school as a precaution. Police say they take every threat seriously.
Well, they should take that threat seriously, because he wasn't doing that for no reason. He would not have posted that for no reason. That was for one of two reasons. Either he was seriously considering shooting up those people, shooting himself, or going into that high school and shooting up the high school. And then he does that in light of what just occurred in Florida with Nicholas Cruz, who also has elements of being a program multiple, a person who was cutting himself, most likely was the victim of pedophilia. These are things that people do when they go through that type of satanic ritual abuse. They start to cut themselves. That's what Mr. Nicholas Cruz was doing, but I'll probably talk about that on another video. But Jonathan Martin definitely needs help. But that's why, brothers, when you decide to make a child, man, you really have to think all the way down the line of how your child is going to live, how they're going to be raised, what you're going to teach the child. It just can't be, I'm going to bust a nut in a chick because she has a fat ass and I want her to stay with me. That's not going to make the woman stay with you, that she's impregnated by you. As a matter of fact, oftentimes it has the opposite effect. And the so-called black woman who was his mother, she decided that she was going to allow an affluent Caucasian man to inseminate her so that she could be the vessel that would bring the Martin Luther King dream into fruition, into reality. And they just said to themselves, we're going to take our son and we're going to send our son to a great school and he's going to be so happy and everything's going to work out fine. And they didn't prep their son for the racial dynamics of the world. They didn't prep their son properly for what he would have to deal with in regards to afflictions. And this is what happens. This is what occurs.
USA.
But anyway, that's the end of their report, and that's also the end of my statements on this issue. Peace.